Get ready. You're listening to Pirated Radio.
I have a question for you, George. If somebody had a gun to your head and you had to pick, so you can't get out of it, would you rather be a giraffe or a cat? And you have all your memories as a human. Oh, we're recording, are we? Yeah. Hello, and welcome back to Pirated Radio. In this third episode, I speak to a lady called Charlotte who runs a company called Kaffeen. Kaffeen's main goal is to help design and marketing studios get more clients on a more regular basis. In this episode, we touch on a couple of things, including her career and how design students can go about starting their own practice once they've been in the industry for a few years. If you're in that sort of situation yourself, where you've been in the industry for a little bit and you're maybe thinking, I could do this myself, hopefully there's a lot from this that you can pull from. Feel free to get in touch with Charlotte. She plugs all of the stuff at the end. But she has her own podcast too called The Kaffeen Espresso, so go and check it out. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Just for the record, George, I'd be a cat.
Well, it's very lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
No problem, thank you. It's great to speak to yourself. I guess I'll just jump straight in. So, I guess first of all, could you give people that might be listening to this a bit of an introduction to yourself and maybe how you got into the world of marketing and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Charlotte. I have a company called Kaffeen, Kaffeen, bit unconventional. And I have been obsessed with brand for pretty much as long as I can remember. From being a child, I remember being obsessed with the Channel 4 idents with the little blocks that created the 4 and just being fascinated by the appeal it had for me. And I didn't really know that this was a thing that could be studied or even a field that could be worked in really until kind of got closer to university age. So I went to University of Leeds, did marketing and communication within the School of Design, the School of Business, kind of in collaboration with each other. And then I moved down to London and started my career in business development for all kinds of creative agencies, from ad agencies through to digital, through to design agencies. Not being a creative myself, I wasn't really aware that this was even a thing that I could get into. I always wanted to work within agencies, but thought because I couldn't draw, that was going to be off limits for me. And then I discovered I was really good at sales, and actually this was a way I could work within agencies. So that's really how my career started. I think probably like a lot of people, even when you're at uni, you don't necessarily know that the job that's right for you exists. It's only when you go out into the world and start exploring stuff. So yeah, the last 15 years I've spent in agency and consulting with agencies to help them to develop their visibility to their dream clients and the desirability to the dream clients and start those conversations with them so they can continue to grow, or at least be, even if they haven't got an ambition to grow physically, at least keep their revenues at the level they want them to be. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think touching on the bit where you said, not knowing what you want to do when you leave, or if it's even a job, I think right now as well, if you're predicting what is going to be open in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be jobs out there that we don't even know are jobs at the moment, don't we?
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And I think a lot of people get scared about what jobs AI will replace. But actually I had a conversation with my brother recently. He works in a really kind of forward-facing aspect of finance and a lot of kind of future trend predicting, etc. And he was saying people get scared about their jobs being taken away. What they don't think about is what opportunities that'll open up and what other kinds of roles will be around we can't even imagine now. So yeah, just echoing what you just said, I think it's exciting, actually. I don't think it's anything to be feared.
Yeah. And I was speaking to a gentleman called Ian Paget that does like a logo podcast, and he was mentioning how it'll take say, for instance, the stuff at the bottom end of the scale gets taken away from, people that do stuff on Fiverr and things like that. That'll get taken over by AI, I assume, at some point. It'll shift sort of the perspective of people that work in design. It'll give them more time to work on different stuff as opposed to working on the stuff that AI will be able to complete. So I think it'll sort of shift that way. But yeah, I'll jump in with my first question, if that's cool. Because when you came and you gave us a little talk at uni, one thing you mentioned was there's people sort of who were graduating now and then within sort of 3 to 5 years are starting to look at starting their own agency. And I don't have like oodles of industry experience, but if I was to think about how much experience you'd need to even think about starting your own practice. It will be sort of, upwards of 10 years. So I wanted to ask sort of, has that always been the case where it's sort of you can jump in from sort of almost like really on in your career? Is that something that's come along as a more recent thing? And do you see that maybe becoming a bit more of the norm going forward?
It's a really interesting question. I think there's been a couple of things in the last especially in the last 5 to 10 years, I think that have really accelerated. I think one is technology and our ability to access people and each other and be able to portray ourselves as bigger than we are. Just not necessarily having to physically be in a place, which is become something we're much more aware of over the course of the last year. But actually, tech companies have been doing that for much longer, being remote, working in entirely remote setups, reducing their overheads and opening up the pool of talent that they can access. That's become something that's been much easier over the last 10 years. And I think there's another thing as well, which is how open people are with their knowledge, experience, problems they've had along the way, just the abundance of materials. If you do have a desire to become an entrepreneur in any space, there is so much more resource around, where previously people might have thought, oh no, that's not for me, I don't have enough financial backing from my family, or that's not for me, I don't have the confidence, or that's not for me, I don't have a business degree. I think people now think, well, why not me? And that's the bit about entrepreneurship and the businesses that I work with, the people who decided to take the plunge and start their own agencies, because the majority of my clients, about 60 to 70%, are between 2 and 10 people. There's some anomalies who are a lot bigger, but yeah, for the most part, I'm with those people who have broken away from an agency in the last 5 years or so, and they're on a steep learning curve, but it's one that they've embraced. They know that was coming up for them. They knew that it was going to be hard work, but it was something they wanted to do. And I love the fizz of energy and just excitement that comes with that world. And I don't think that really existed to such an extent, beyond 10 years ago. So it's an exciting time if you do have a desire to be an entrepreneur. But in terms of your question about how much experience does it take to go away and do your own thing, I think it's really about your confidence and the amount you've exposed yourself to within the time that you have been in industry. So one of the things that I talked about when I was guest lecturing to your cohort at uni was, when you do go into agency, yes, your 20s, fresh out of uni, you want to enjoy life, you want to be going out and you want to be doing everything. But if you do have an ambition to start your own thing, just make sure you're absorbing as much as possible within the business from all the different departments, because the reality is when you go off and do your own thing, you need an understanding of all of them, not just design, if that's your specialism. And the reality is you could break away and do something a lot sooner if you feel like you have an understanding about that, or if you feel like you've got advisors or people you can draw upon who can fill in the gaps where you don't have experience. I talk to people within the third year university environment because I want them to be aware of what sales and marketing looks like. They may not ordinarily consider. They may just think that's work's going to come through the door, and even the biggest agencies have to work hard on new business. So that's an area that I want to highlight to people if they do want to do their own thing in due course.
No, that's really insightful. Thank you. I guess I'll just jump forward. You have kind of already answered this, I think, but I wanted to ask. So with sort of the advancements of tech and being able to this isn't necessarily about starting your own agency, it's a bit different, but with the advancements of being able, say if I wanted to speak to someone who's in Asia, Africa, America, I could just get them on a video call, we're chatting away instantly. Do you think that as a result of that, freelance will maybe become the norm now? And also sort of as a bit of an aside to that, do you think that as time goes on in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, do you think that people will actually commute to an office anymore, or will things sort of become a lot more online? Like Mark Zuckerberg has talked about the idea of people teleporting to work through VR and stuff like that, as opposed to actually getting in a car and driving to it. Do you think that personally maybe that is the way we're going?
Oh, so much to unpack there. I think...
Sorry, I keep doing that with people.
No, it's good. I was just thinking I should have written notes when I was thinking through your question. Obviously, there are elements of technology that are going to be easier for huge technology firms like Facebook, with the abundance of advertising revenue that they have, to activate, that aren't going to be accessible to the rest of us mere mortals sometimes. So like teleporting into meetings and stuff. I do think so. For me, the most exciting shift over the last year has been seeing within this industry seeing how some of the more traditional old school style agencies have adjusted to the remote setup instead of being in person. And the reason for that is because my specialism is really with design agencies who are brand and packaging specialists, because they work in the food and drink space, the majority, or just branded packaged goods, basically FMCG. And because that naturally is printed work, and therefore in CMYK colours, it's been very important until now to present work in person, so that the client is seeing the product, the output as true to life as possible. Obviously, that's been very difficult over the last year, aside from couriering stuff to people so they can see it in person. It's been very difficult to reveal the work in person in the same room. And so adjustments have had to be made. And that's been really interesting to me. There have been some agencies who have been less adaptable to that, and others who've actually embraced it because maybe it's something they wanted to do before, but clients have demanded they did otherwise. So it's really encouraged them to kind of push forward. I think of the clients that I work with who've really embraced the changes that have been kind of forced upon them over the last year, the feedback that I'm hearing is that they are so excited about the pool of talent that they're now able to access. So whereas previously they might have been restricted to freelancers who are in the London area and whose day rates were excessive because they knew that supply was, lacking, and they were massively in demand. And that's, it's always been a bit of an off-putting factor to some small agencies who depend on freelancers. All of a sudden, they can access freelancers anywhere, because it really doesn't make any difference whether they're in London, 5 minutes down the road from an office that they might ordinarily be sat in if it wasn't, 2020, 2021. But they could be in Brazil or somewhere, as long as they're willing to stay up past their bedtime or, just be on a different time zone. The sky's the limit, the world's the limit. And I think that's really exciting. I think it's exciting for loads of different reasons, from an infrastructure and economic perspective. I'm from West Yorkshire, and obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious because we're chatting here on audio, but I'm in London now, and I've lived in lots of different places around the world, but I'm always very conscious when I go back to Yorkshire. People are like, oh yeah, move down south, of course you did. A sense of brain drain. And the reality is, if I was graduating now, that might look quite different. I might not necessarily have moved, because the reality is I moved for career prospects, and there's a huge financial penalty to moving to London. You do get more of a wage in London, but the cost of living doesn't compare to the increase in salary that you get. Generally, they talk about London waiting. Anyhow, I'm not going to get down that rabbit hole, but I think I genuinely think it's really exciting. I think it's really exciting for not just for global talent and, your ability to work with an agency in Rio or New York or Tokyo with, relative ease compared to previously, but it's also exciting for other parts of the UK, just thinking closer to home, the fact that they've got the opportunity to retain their talent and not kind of encourage this brain drain to London or, Manchester or any of the other bigger cities that might be becoming a hub for media and creativity. So I think that's really exciting. So I think, if we talk about will freelancing become the norm? I am seeing a huge trend, and it's not anything new. I think it's been the last 2 or 3 years, but kind of becoming faster now. I'm seeing a trend to people positioning themselves, people who are technically freelancers, but positioning themselves as a hub of talent and services, because potentially they are a graphic designer, but they know somebody who's an incredible developer. They know somebody else who's an incredible art worker. They know somebody else who's good at visualizing, a photographer. And so they can present themselves as a full service agency when the reality is it's just them, and they hire people ad lib when they need additional input as the project requires. I think that that naturally means more people will be freelancers in inverted commas, because they'll hop between projects and different, companies and billing different people. But the reality is that's just smart working. That's like if you look at manufacturing and over the past 50 years or more, it's the same concept as just-in-time delivery. It's this idea that you're using something at the moment you need it rather than keeping a whole bunch of people paid on your roster, which is effectively what a studio is when it's filled with 80 people who aren't always at full capacity all the time. It's just so much more efficient. And I think that's exciting because it'll mean prices become cheaper to clients naturally. Overheads for the agency or, whatever you want to call it, the design outfit will go down. More people will have access to design, which ultimately means, because it becomes more affordable, which ultimately means everything will look better. That's my very rudimentary way of looking at it. And, technology's played a huge part in that as well over the past few years. But I think, the shift to kind of more people working freelance will definitely be part of that. But there's a big, I think a big warning sign to me, which is that don't necessarily feel like when you're in an agency, you're benefiting from continuous professional development. I think the reality is the first 5 to 10 years of your career is just a real shit show most of the time, working really late and, being overworked and charged out for much more than you're paid for. Just there's loads of things that aren't necessarily great about it, but it's not necessarily the agency being naughty. It's more to do with the fact that the work doesn't come in on a consistent basis. So sometimes they need to really stretch themselves. The reality is that you're not getting continuous professional development internally at an agency unless you're really pushing for it yourself. I think the risk if you're working freelance is that you're going to get even less exposure to people, to mentors, to training, to all different kinds of things. And I think it's really, really crucial that, alongside your pension, your ISA, which I'd encourage you to think about much sooner than your late 30s, because there's not going to be much money left in the pot by the time you guys retire, so you really need to think about that soon. But I also think you should dedicate some budget if you are freelancing to your own training, to your own development, and you can pick and choose what that curriculum looks like for yourself, which is the most fun bit. It's something that I really enjoy doing, and working on a couple of different training programs at the moment where I'm learning. Not that I'm developing them for other people, but I'm learning from them. Which in turn helps to inform what I do, and my clients benefit from it. But more than anything else, gives me the self-confidence and the reassurance that I'm staying on top of my game, which otherwise, if I just rested on my laurels, just continued executing rather than learning, or sometimes I term it earning rather than learning, then at some point I might realize that I'm a bit out of date, that I don't have the forefront of knowledge. So that's just a bit of a warning to you guys. Like, make sure you're developing yourself professionally. Make sure that you're thinking about what you want to learn, and you're dedicating time and money to that as you freelance.
I think as well with that, I think with sort of, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube now that you can just pick and choose from. If you wanted to learn more about the business of design, there's like numerous channels on YouTube that'll give you a load of, really well-crafted advice on that the people that have said it have been in industry for, upwards of 15 years, and it's all just free, which is lovely too.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm a huge fan of audiobooks and, Kindle obviously as well, and podcasts. Like, this isn't necessarily to do with paying a lot of money for training. It's to do with curation, because what you can do is spend a lot of time sifting through crap to find really good quality content that's actually going to improve you. So I think, dedicate some time to finding out who those kind of pillars are in your mind, people who are really authoritative, really know what they're doing in a particular space, and take the time to follow and absorb what they're saying, rather than just picking your resources anywhere, because not all learning resources are created equal, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess going forward as well, I've realised now these questions kind of jump everywhere, but I just wanted to ask, and this, you can kind of touch on this a little bit, and then if you don't want to go into in depth, because it's people can get in touch with you if they want to know more, but I just wanted to ask, if I was someone who's graduated right now and they want to think about starting their own practice, what sort of steps would they begin to take to do that? And if you could just touch on what people maybe might have, what would be the best practice for them to do from the start?
Absolutely. So when I've asked friends and colleagues, clients who've been particularly successful at shifting from working in agency to running their own outfit. They always say they started much earlier than they felt comfortable with. And by that, I mean, they seriously curated their freelance projects while they were still in agency. So, most designers are taking on freelance work while they're in agency, just because as soon as somebody knows you're a designer, they tend to ask it, oh, I just need a little logo creating or whatever. And it starts like that. And then you kind of get exposed to bigger projects. But they were really intentional about those projects. They were reaching out to people proactively, even though they were already working for an agency. And then when they got to a kind of critical mass where they had just enough income coming in to survive from the freelance stuff, they quit their jobs and they dedicated more time and energy to it, safe in the knowledge that they had a kind of an experience and a buffer there to start with. I think the scariest thing you can do is decide cold turkey to start your own agency or own, whatever you want to call it, design outfit, and not have any experience of your own that you can show on your website or on your Instagram profile or however you decide your online presence is going to be to direct people to, because no one is going to buy your services if you don't have experience that you're able to demonstrate, if you don't have testimonials, if you don't have results to show. So I'd say, build up your experience that you're able to show as your own sooner rather than later. And when you're building that experience, don't focus on only showing the projects that have turned out exactly how you wanted them to aesthetically, because the reality is loads of projects will get pushed, all over the shop till the point you're not actually that happy with the outcome because the client's been overly pushy or there's been too many stakeholders involved and there's been too much groupthink or whatever. That happens even to the best of agencies. So don't write them off because of that. They still should be catered on your website. Just make sure for every project you work on, you get a testimonial from that client that is obviously positive, if at all possible. And also try and get results for that project, because when a future client is looking at your portfolio, if they can see one of their peers talking about working with you in a positive light, and if they can see commercial results that they may be lusting after themselves detailed there, they're going to feel reassured by that, and it's going to be much easier to sell in at a higher price than you would do as a freelancer, where you're basically exchanging your time for money. This allows you to put a price on the value you're going to bring to that brand in the future rather than the time you spend on creating it.
Yeah, that's fine. This has been super duper insightful. I think there's a lot in here, especially if someone is, thinking about starting their own agency. There's a lot of people can pull from this if this gets out to them. Hopefully it does. And then lastly, this is just the last question. It's a bit cliche, but if you were to go back and speak to yourself when you first got into this, what would you tell yourself essentially? Have you got any piece of advice that you'd maybe give to your former self?
I'd say, well, no one's going to give you permission to do anything. Start before you're ready. Know that sometimes people in authority are saying things because they're scared and not necessarily representative of what's actually going on. So just basically be more confident, which I don't think will come as a surprise to anybody. I feel like we spend our lives just trying to become more confident and without being becoming jaded. But I think you are, and I was so much more capable than I gave myself credit for from a younger age. And the reality is I could be doing a lot of what I do now. I could have been doing it a lot earlier. It's just a case of having belief in yourself and having the confidence. And I'm somebody who is very forward thinking, always wants to be on to the next thing, always wants to achieve the next goal. And sometimes I look back and I feel a little bit, I don't want to use the word regretful, but kind of a bit sad that I didn't push some things on sooner, and they were generally due to external factors. So yeah, trust your gut, basically. Yeah,
so I guess lastly, where can people find you online? Do you want to plug all of your Instagram, your website and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the best place to just come and find me is at the website, which is Kaffeen, KAFFEEN.club, CLUB. And if you head there and you are thinking about starting your own agency, there's a free agency marketing mini course that you can grab on there. Which is a bit of an insight into some of the top line stuff that I'd recommend you think about. So if you're kind of at those early stages of thinking about going and doing your own thing, whether that's as a freelancer or starting your own design outfit, that's a really good place to start in terms of understanding what you should be doing marketing wise. And through the site, you can find all the other ways to connect with me too. LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram are a bit more fledgling. I've only started them very, very recently and very reluctantly, so don't dwell too long on those. But LinkedIn's really where I hang out most of the time. So it'd be great to see you over there.
Cheers for listening. I hope that was insightful for yourself as it was for me. If you want to connect with myself online, my Instagram is @PiratedMaterial. My website is piratedmaterial.co.uk. Cheers for listening, and I'll see you next time.